All right, welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. You know what, guys? Last week I said I was the host for the episode, and then Zach ended up hosting the entire episode. But this week I'm actually going to host, I think, most of the episode with Zach Blostein, Chris Nee. Gentlemen, good morning, and a happy Glennaissance to both of you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're gonna be as happy as we possibly can be. So FSU fell to Clemson over the weekend, not in surprising fashion. It was 29-13. Some blocked field goals help you out, keep it a little closer. The story of that game, though, is going to be Brock Glenn and how he performed. And while the pure stat line doesn't look a whole lot different, and the result is you're still scoring in the teens, some of the more advanced metrics and just the simple eye test show you that it looked a little different. And that's going to give us some interesting talking points to go over throughout the episode today. We'll also do a mid-season check-in. We were going to do like pre-planning before the season, like, oh, this would be a really good point for a mid-year report card. F, like that's there we go. That's the grade for the season midway through. We'll go more into big picture stuff of what kind of changes we would make if we were king for the day type of deal. Youth movement we're going to talk about. So yeah, we got some things to go over that I think will be kind of interesting given where FSU is, which is 1-5 right now. Before we go any further, the sponsor that's going to help you kind of navigate through a 1-5 sort of season, Chattanooga Whiskey. Chattanooga Whiskey is by far the best craft distillery that I've got hundreds of bottles, not just behind me, but all over the place in my house, much to my wife's chagrin. And it is my favorite craft distillery. It has been even before they were a sponsor, and it's because they do such an exquisite job, not just with quality and affordability, but also like they're interesting. Like they do different experimental things, and Chattanooga Whiskey is always kind of pushing the envelope and trying to bolster its product, and it's just super interesting and good. And please support people who do unique things that are very transparent with how they make their whiskey, and they just do an awesome job. So you can find them all throughout the Southeast. And then if you end up loading up on Chattanooga Whiskey and say, you know what, feeling a buzz here, I want to buy a house, who would you guys go to?
The Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Thanks for the enthusiasm, Chris. The Turner Group. Yeah, Colin Turner, Amy Turner, the Turner Group down in Central Florida can help you out, buying a home, selling a home, whatever you're looking for, even if you're just kind of thinking about what the process is going to look like, what would that be involved with, like who do I have to talk to? The Turner Group is where you're going to start off, and they're going to be able to get you in a good place to get going on that process throughout the state of Florida. So they are buyers and own sponsors. Colin's legitimately awesome dude, and runs a great business. And we've had multiple happy home sellers or buyers, I guess, so far. Buyers, Sonowners. Sorry, Colin. The Turner Group. All right, guys. Brock Glenn comes in as the starting quarterback. DJ Uiagalelei is out for the foreseeable future, potentially season-ending injury. I think that's kind of where it's probably trending. We saw him on the sideline with his right hand wrapped up pretty good, more so than when we saw him on Tuesday. So imagine there was some level of procedure done there. So that means for the foreseeable future, Brock Glenn is your quarterback. He comes in, he's 23 of 41 for 228 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. The offense only scores 13 points, but Chris, optically, did it feel different to you watching it in the press box?
Yeah, it got better as the game went on. Brock showed some things with his legs where he could loosen things up, expand plays, continue plays, work forward. There were a couple high-level throws, not all completed because, fifth-year seniors can't be relied upon. But, yeah, in general, it's a little more crisp, a little bit better, but it's still very bad offense.
It is a very bad offense. It's perhaps the worst offense in college football, certainly in Power 5 or 4. Yeah, they got some issues there. Zachary, though, let's talk about what you saw from the offense. More so like you were in the stands as a fan watching this game. Energy-wise, like what felt maybe different than other games you've been to this year? Assuming, I don't want to lead you, that it did feel a little different.
Yeah, I mean, surprised by the crowd size, like, for what they can, fill that stadium right now with all the construction on the, the upper end of the home side. Like, it was pretty full. So I guess that was encouraging considering, how this team's performed to this point. Seems like the fans are very much in favor of a youth movement, and that's been pretty evident just seeing our readers and listeners and just being on social media. And it was evident in the stadium, when they announced Brock Glenn as the starter. I mean, that was probably the biggest applause we've seen for a player announced as a starter this season. And then Landon Thomas also got a ton of applause as well, because I don't know if the general FSU fan knows who Landon Thomas is, but they definitely know who the starter before him was. So yeah, I think
that's probably what that was a response to. But
exactly. So I think fans are definitely in favor of FSU's move to play more young players, and despite how I think everyone thought that game was going to go, like I think it was a better outcome, because you had I wrote about this in my prediction. Like I wanted to see signs of growth from Brock Glenn, and encouraging an encouraging performance that you can build upon, and I think that's what he delivered.
I've been working with Chris for 10 years, almost 8 years. I kind of I know the tells at this point. You don't seem super enthusiastic by what you saw with Brock. Like not as much as I myself, Zach. I think most of those 24. You don't seem quite as exuberant about it. Is that just because the whole offense is bogged down?
I mean, they're dreadfully bad. It was a late switch. It's something that should have happened beforehand. I mean, if
Right.
DJU wasn't hurt, I'm not convinced the head coach would not go back to DJU because he's stubborn and stuck on it. So like, I struggle to have a good old party time with regards to. I'm glad Brock Glenn is now their quarterback. I'm glad they are now trying something different. It's something they should have done at halftime in the Memphis game when they were getting their ass handed to them. They were dreadful on offense, but they didn't. So I thought Brock was fine, but like the machine is still broken. The delivery system's a little bit better, but the machine's still broken. They're dreadful on offense. Their offense. I mean, we're talking about predictions. My prediction was short and sweet. Phil Moffitt was going to run the ball a lot. He ran for like $154, controlled the game, shortened it, and that they weren't going to be able to block them, and they weren't able to block them. They were not very good at the point of attack. FSU can't block well, and they can't tackle well. And until they fix those things, most of the other stuff doesn't really matter. And in that game, you still, despite the change of delivery system, you still have, the Darian Williamson drop. There's multiple other drops in the game, total of 2 to 3 at least in that game. You can't block it. Your running game is non-existent, ineffective, and pathetically awful. You can't throw wide receiver screens because you also can't block those. So that's not an option to get you out of the running game. They're just so bad in so many ways that I struggle to get overly excited about. I'm glad Brock came in. I'm glad Brock performed well. I'm glad Brock gave his best performance of his career to this point. And it's a building block. And I hope he's given the full support of his head coach, the coaching staff, and his players to continue to go and improve upon that and try to build around that through the back half of the season. But yeah, I struggle to have a great deal of exuberance over it, I guess.
A building Brock, if you will. What stat here pisses you guys off the most? We're gonna rank it here. Buy or Sonone, which stat pisses you off the most? FSU is 131st nationally in drop rate at 10.3%. That's almost double the national average. It's 130th in pressure rate, 43%. And it's 133rd nationally in yards per carry before contact at 0.59. So you're averaging a little bit more than half a yard before you get hit.
I think I'll go with pressure rate as my buy.
Okay.
I'll go with the yards before contact.
I'll just go with drop rate just so we're all balanced here. They have issues all across the board, and these have existed well before Brock Glenn was your quarterback. You can't really block in either pass pro. I think that'll get a little bit better, and actually was a little bit better with a quicker trigger mechanism with Brock Glenn. But you saw the drop rate really come back to haunt you. I think FSU had 5 drops if you include the Kentron Portier one, which was called back for holding, so it was negated, but they counted that. And the drop rate statistics, and so that was worse than it's been. That was probably your worst performance in terms of dropping the football. And then the yards per contact, or yards per carry before contact. I mean, what was the stat line for how many rushing yards you had? 22?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, 22 on 23 carries. You averaged a yard a carry, actually less than that. And this is ad nauseum, but we've talked about this a ton, but for an offense that thought it was going to be able to be built around the run game, you are the worst in the country at it. Is sobering, and it's not good. It's not good, and there's many issues, many reasons why for those issues. I will say, as we kind of go back to the quarterback difference and some of the optics with how the offense looked, and we'll dive into some of the metrics here too, because if you're looking for like this season is what it is, you're just looking to build for the youth movement that Zach talked about. I want to dive into that too, but I think it does start with getting something more out of your quarterback position moving forward. And Brock Glenn gave you a semblance of hope, which is more than you've had for majority of this campaign. And to Chris's point, yes, we were clamoring for a change after game 2. I think was probably about when you're like, okay, this is it. Like this is what the offense is. With Brock Glenn, I will eat some crow. I was worried that you were going to throw this kid out there to the Wolves, and it was going to be an awful situation. He would have been he did make his 3rd career start against a top 15 team. Only 3 other quarterbacks have done that to start off their careers since 2016. One of those was Jordan Travis. Another one, Alex Hornibrook, which is just a wild, like that. Alex Hornibrook played with Jordan Travis, who played with Brock Glenn, and so 3 out of the 4 they're associated with you. The other one was who's the old dude from Georgia?
Stetson Bennett.
So anyways, I thought that you would, maybe have some elements around you with the supporting cast and the situation you're stepping into that would ruin Brock Glenn or kind of contribute to that. But like the opposite, he got better as the game went on. I thought that stood out. The poise, the energy, the grittiness that he brings, the moxie that we like to talk about, like that was all there and that was all evident. What stood out to you, Chris, the most about his performance? Like if you're saying, okay, this is a glimmer of hope, this is something you can build on against Duke, against UNC, against defenses that aren't quite Clemson level athletes, like what gives you optimism, I guess, to build on in the next few weeks here after the bye?
I think the biggest thing is that he quickly adjusted to understanding the parameters of the relationship on the field with regards to who he has blocking in front of him and that they're not any good at it. He did a very good job in the second half of using his feet to extend plays, of understanding the need to get rid of it rapidly, the understanding of basically not being able to hold the ball. He took a couple sacks and hits in that game because he wanted to hold to try to make the throw. I felt like the trigger got better as the game went on, and I think that's just understanding, man, these guys can't block in front of me right now.
What about you, Zach? What stood out to you about Brock's performance?
The main reason why I think a lot of people called for a change with this offense was not because Brock was going to come in and significantly play better than DJU, even though I think in this game he did play better than DJU had.
Can I stop real quick with that, Zach? And as you gather something with the metrics, can I sprinkle in some nerdiness? So Brock Glenn ended up having a PFF grade of 83.5 overall. That was over the last 2 years the second highest PFF grade that a FSU quarterback has had. I think Jordan Travis against Duke had one in the 84-ish range. Wow.
He threw a pick 6 in that game.
But he did a lot of really good things at the end of that game.
He did.
What he did. But anyways, so he went in. He had the highest, both the highest QBR that FSU has had this season and the highest PFF grade, which could still change. So we'll go back and review it later in the week, but still probably the highest that you've had. So sorry, continue, is by far the best by any metric.
Yeah. So that was surprising to me that it was noticeably better. But I think the thing that I talked about on here was just uplifting and motivating his teammates with his energy and his want to play well and win. And I thought that was super evident. I mean, him celebrating his teammates' success, making sure that everyone was on the same page. I thought that was all super encouraging with Brock Glenn under center. And that's, like I said, the main reason why I wanted to see the change. And I'm pleasantly surprised that he played better than FSU's passing attack has performed throughout the beginning of this season.
There was a play early on, I think in the first drive, where he gets hit, knocked down, and one offensive lineman went back to help him up. I think it was Andre Otto.
Yeah, the young kid.
Yeah, Andre Otto had a difficult game. He had a hard time, but
he had some good moments mixed in there. But yes, he also had some where he flat out got put on his backside.
And that's that's gonna be.
I'm more concerned that Darius Washington and Maurice Smith keep having bad games when they've played 8 million snaps combined.
Is snapping important to you?
Currently,
later on in the game, there was a play where Brock got pressured out of the pocket, rolled right. He was back in his own end zone and got rid of the ball. And I think he kind of faded backwards. And this was after they had led their touchdown drive in the first half. And multiple offensive linemen went to go and help just get him back to the huddle and stuff. And anyways, a small distinction in difference there, but you saw people respond to him throughout the course of the game. And I think that like means something. Again, this is a 1-5 team. Like we're grasping at the minutia to find a semblance of hope, and Brock Glenn, the way he performed, provides that to you. So we can all agree that he was better than what you've seen the previous 5 games. He's a redshirt freshman. He gives you something to build on. Mike Norvell said after the contest, I'll try to pull up the quote here, that he was also considering playing Luke. Here we go.
Yeah, based on game sequence.
Yeah, based on game sequence. Quote, there's even times going into it, potentially getting him an opportunity throughout it. He's talking about Luke. Obviously, the game, how it played out in the sequence, I elected not to do it this one. I'm excited about the room. I think those guys, you see Brock with now, I guess it's his 4th game under his belt of experience, but I thought he did some better things than what showed him in his first start or his last start. I fully expect him to take some positive steps moving forward because he shows flashes of what he is capable of. So, quarterback position moving forward, twofold. We can do some retroactive stuff, but first, moving forward, Mike Norvell praised Brock Glenn for his performance, how he prepared. He also continually brings up Luke Kromenhoek when discussing Brock Glenn. Why? And that goes back to last week. It goes back to this week, this weekend, goes back to the week before. So about 3 or 4 times that Mike's had the opportunity to talk about Brock Glenn in preparation, he's also brought up the true freshman quarterback. Why do we think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's a matter of in-season recruiting where you're trying to keep everybody happy to a degree.
I think that's what it is.
But, like, I don't know for a fact.
I think he's trying to make sure that like Luke is dialed in the sense that, like, I mean, I think going into this game, they legitimately, I mean, I heard from multiple people that they had plans to play Luke. And he mentioned that after the game that they did, but he just didn't see it as an opportunity to get him in there because of, how Brock Glenn was performing. But yeah, I think it's what Chris said. I think it's some in-season recruiting of your roster. You want to try to keep both these quarterbacks, especially, heading into next season. You want to see how that quarterback battle is going to unfold, at least into the spring, right? Like, I think there's some expectation that you could lose one of those guys after the spring if you figure out, who the starter is going to be. But that's a later problem. But I do agree with Chris. I think that's what it could be.
I think we would all, I'll speak for myself. Like, I would like to see Luke Kromenhoek at some point this season. I would like, and I don't care if you burn the red shirt or not. And I don't think he should either. Like, Luke Kromenhoek shouldn't be playing 5 years of college football, ideally. Something went poorly.
By time Luke's year 4, year 5, I'm not sure red shirts are even going to really exist anymore. I mean,
so, like, that
push to do away with that anyways.
The idea of him you only get 4 to play. I'm like, you're just going to play him if you think there's good spots to play. I'm okay with that. But what's going to be the balancing act now moving forward is I think you have something with Brock Glenn. And, like, how much do you need to lean into that of, like, trying to go full go, hey, this guy gives us something that we have not had yet this season, and there might be more to build on, like, for the foreseeable future. And so I think that's the balancing act. It's like you don't want to limit rhythm. Like, part of me I would have liked for Mike after the game, and he was, like, complimentary of Brock, but he also said there were some bad things that he did. And he was measured in how he talked about Brock Glenn. And they only scored 13 points. So I get it. You're not throwing a parade for a 13-point performance. But I think I would like to see, based on what the performance was with the expectations around and the supporting cast around Brock Glenn, like a full-on lean into it.
Yeah, change in tone of messaging. He was very protective and defensive of DJU. He has not felt in any form or fashion that way about Brock Glenn in the way he's communicated things.
Part of it might be that they think Brock can handle that, publicly.
I think part of it is that they staked a lot on DJU being their offense, and, well, it failed miserably, and I think that's tough for people who have a lot on the line to accept and be upfront about, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think he's embarrassed that they picked DJU and they're 1-4 because of him. Not solely because of him, but largely because none of it worked. That sucks. Like, I don't like admitting a mistake. I hate it. I'm an old guy. I really hate it. I'm super stubborn about that stuff. But I think that's a degree of it.
So the retroactive part of the conversation I want to have is that, Chris, is it took you this long to make the decision. And I understand that there was, once you made a decision, you weren't going to be able to go back. I don't think Brock Glenn was giving you, and people have asked on the board a lot, like, was Brock Glenn really that poor in preseason camp and parts of practice to where he wasn't better than DJU in practice? Yes. There wasn't a whole lot of evidence that Brock had taken an ascension as a quarterback. And I thought in the last 3 weeks now, especially his Wednesday practices have been better each time. And
that's
so,
been
like,
true for the team as a whole.
Sure. But he was outperforming DJ before DJ got hurt, I thought, in those Wednesday practices. And then Brock had a really good Wednesday, or at least a really solid Wednesday, I should say, this past week. He ran a 2-minute drill really well.
Same conversation. They have been forcing more duties upon Luke in those settings too.
Sure. And I think that because they do want to play both of them at some point this season, they do want to get both those guys reps, as they should. That makes sense to me. But like the fact that it took an extra 2.5 games to make this decision, and Mike said after the SMU game, and then reiterated it, easy for me to say, later in the week, that the following week, that he was going to make a change, at least for that game, regardless of the injury with DJ Ongole. But to your point, Chris, like, we're not sure, like, is Brock Glenn starting? Okay, would have come in the game against SMU after the third interception. What would have happened this week, like, if DJ were still healthy and available? Like, would they have made the change? And so why not? Why wasn't this change made? I think there's a high level of criticism that you can put on the coaching staff for delaying a change that clearly helped the offense against the best defense you faced this season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. The change should have happened a couple weeks ago, plain and simple. And I believe it was Mike Norvell's decision not to make the change, and it was a matter of still trying to believe we can be what I think we can be, which they are not. But
I just saw in the bottom corner the recording button. I thought we weren't recording. We are. We're good. It just doesn't light up when you hit it, and it's lit up somewhere else. We're good. Phew. I was gonna say it was 20 minutes gone. Okay, so Zach, do you have what's your theory as to why it took this long? And what kind of criticism can we put on, like, that's fair? Like, I understand Mike Norvell not wanting to blow everything up of what you thought you could be, but man, it took probably 2.5 games too long.
I don't know. I mean, I've asked a bunch of people that question, leading up to the change and even afterwards. And I don't think Norvell, aside from maybe a few people in the organization, has given a clear explanation, aside from the fact that he thought that DJU gave them the best chance to win. I don't know if it's them seeing on tape all the guys around DJU making tons of mistakes in the receiving core, on the O-line, and just thinking that, well, if we can fix those things, the offense will look better, and not realizing that, some of the issues, some of the reason why those other groups look bad, obviously some of those issues are still showing up with Brock Glenn under center, but the offense just didn't work efficiently under DJU. And anyone who looked and watched this program over the first 4 games or 5 games understood that clearly. So I don't know. Is it a lack of belief in Brock Glenn?
Well, real quick, I'll share 2 more points. One, I think hesitancy to change from the head coach partly was valuing the ball. We hadn't seen DJU do a really poor job of that till SMU. I also think there's a degree of they know the O-line stinks, and putting somebody behind is unfair to that person, but it is what it is. It's a business decision. But my second point is he spoke, I want to say, after Game 3 of them, he specifically said they had no identity as an offense. And, my mind always goes to who touches the ball the most on offense. It's quarterback, who's the person to guaranteed touch the ball because of delivery system. After a quarterback, it's a running back. And they don't use Lawrence Toafili a whole lot outside of one game this year. And their quarterback was no good. So, you're not changing LT, and to a degree, you have Cam Davis in that mix, especially with Roydell going down. But the quarterback was the guy, and they stuck with him while they had no identity. And that just, to me, is perplexing that you would readily admit outwardly that you have no identity, but yet you stick with the guy who literally is the singular person that can most define your identity offensively. I thought it was like banging your head into a wall in stubbornness.
I've seen people theorize, and I want to kind of dismiss this all over the place. And we've been asked about it on our board too, that they were committed to DJ because of the financial obligation they made to him.
It's sunk cost.
Yeah,
it sucks, but it's sunk cost.
But that I don't think that went into their decision making to play.
I don't think so either.
I don't either.
No, I don't think so either. Now, if we want to have the conversation of what you could have done with an extra $800,000 or so on this roster,
I mean, how much is Vanderbilt playing there?
Even if they were similar quarterback play, that's a toughie. But for the guy, the backup to go ahead and
you may have been actually able to get a tackle
or a receiver that can catch the ball,
or both. With 800,000, you probably could have gotten both. So that's a toughie. But yeah, I think they're ultimately, and we've asked Mike a lot about the quarterback position and whether he's making a change and reasonings for sticking with you. At this point, do we just have to ask him, why didn't you? Why did it take this long?
I mean, I feel like to a degree that was asked after the game. I think it was Kurt asked the question, right?
Yeah. Kurt asked if he had any regrets of not playing Brock or younger players earlier.
Could hop in the time machine, essentially.
What was his answer to
back?
Yeah, give me a second.
That you kind of take everything into account.
Here, I got it. You want me to read it?
Yeah, have at it.
All right. Reading on audio is always good. Quote, there's a lot of things that goes into it. You can always, I promise you, we want to do everything in our power to win a game. Did you guys ever play popcorn in high school, by the way? No? Is that only
Focus it on.
Okay. We're working our butt off to make sure that making sure that we're doing that. And yes, it's a balance of things that help you operate and make sure that we had some mistakes that showed up because of maybe not as experienced in our communication or situations and things that where we are going to have to be better. Those guys are growing through it, but I'm glad that they did what they did with the opportunity they had tonight. Obviously, we have to continue to grow them throughout the practice. So, I mean, it wasn't really he was asked if he had any reservations about it, I think, and didn't. So I don't know. This might be a mystery forever of why it took this long.
I'm sure some stuff.
Are we okay with that? I guess we're okay with that. We have to be at peace with it.
I don't know if it's your connection or my connection, but
I don't know. I think it's your connection. I'm not taking any blame for anything. Okay.
This season.
So that is the quarterback play. Brock Glenn did deliver some really nice throws throughout the game. He had some drops, but there were some positives of the supporting cast around him as well when it comes to youngsters. True freshmen making plays, underclassmen making plays. Let's start off with the tight ends. You had Landon Thomas catch 7 of 8 targets that went his way. There was a drop later in the game, but also some really nice yard after the catch stuff. And seven catches, 80 yards is productive. And then you got to see a guy who should be playing in high school football right now, and Amari Williams make a really athletic catch in the end zone for the first touchdown of his career, the first touchdown of Brock Glenn's career. You saw the way the team responded to that. So let's start off with just talking about that youth movement. Chris, you wrote about it. What did you see from the young players, and I guess how much allocation of snaps and resources did we see in the course of the game to underclassmen?
I mean, it keeps increasing. I think it's 9 total freshmen now because BJ Gibson, Micah Danzy also made their debuts. We saw Danzy
Free BJ.
while they didn't connect on those plays, you saw the ability for him to sort of open up field and work up field very quickly. They ran a couple wheel routes with him. In Landon Thomas's case, I think it speaks to why they didn't take a transfer tight end. I think they didn't want to rock the boat when it came to Landon. The truth is, maybe they should have taken a transfer to replace Kyle Morlock, but that's hindsight at play. But Landon is sort of what Landon. I'm saying, Landon is what they thought he was. He's a very talented young man. He's a good blocker for a kid fresh out of high school. That's always a huge jump up in the college game for guys at that position, especially with what FSU does with their tight ends. But yeah, Landon's got good hands. I think he was 7 of 8 on targets. And, he just was productive. The 35-yard catch showed his athleticism and his ability to work downfield. That's the best tight end they've had in this offense, not named Jaheim Bell in Mike Norvell's time at FSU. Amari's athletic as hell. Blocking is a bit of an issue for him. He's willingly physical, especially as a kid who played D-end a lot in high school and was originally recruited as a D-end. But it's just a matter of sort of like being able to absorb big bodies in the college game. Amari's not particularly a wide, super defined kid at this point. He's done a good job of improving that department, but that's where he will probably struggle. To me, Amari's always, in my view, is Landon is more your natural tight end in this offense, while Amari's a little bit more of a flex out tight end in this offense. But yeah, keep rolling him out there. Andre Otto's another guy we saw mixed bag of results, had some good moments where he moved people, had some moments where he ended up on his backside and got called for a holding. But keep playing him. Your guard position's not good anyways. Let's see what you've got there. He is somebody you believe in. He's also somebody who I think will take the good with the bad and it won't mess him up, and he will improve as he continues to play.
I like that they made that move.
Yeah. I mean, you've been dreadful at guard. When you lost Richie Leonard, your guard position was pretty much shot because, Keandre Jones and TJ Ferguson both have been unreliable. Bryson Estes is a guy that's in your mix for depth, but at this point, I think that's all he is depth for you. So yeah, go ahead and play to Otto, see what you got there. He's the youngest lineman that you feel like you have something from, not named Jalen Early, who's not as young, but is still relatively young. Some others, we saw BJ Gibson. I think he played 3 total snaps. Micah Danzy, I think, played 4 snaps, if I remember correctly. The wheel route athleticism it showed there, that's definitely something that at some point they're going to hit, and it's going to be an explosive. Defensively, saw that kind of continue that trend. KJ Kirkland's a guy who I think forget is still very young, and he's played a lot and played pretty well. Omar Graham had the best game of his career at Tip to Omar. Plenty of hate has come from this podcast for his performances this year. But he was good on Saturday against a very good football team in Clemson. Who else on that? But KJ Sampson got limited reps. There were a few others on defense. On the flip side of this, Conrad Hussey's a young guy, and he's actually a young guy they've invested a ton of time in. He's playing pretty poorly at this point. He essentially got himself benched and then got 1 series later in that game because he went to play the ball and he ended up tackling Fentrell Cypress, allowing an explosive. Correct. So yeah, that's the trade-off you're going to take. But I think Conrad's not an issue as much as, well, it is an issue of youth because it's maturity. But I think he's different than others because he has a healthy amount of reps. He's just playing poor football right now. He's somebody that needs to take a healthy look in the mirror, watch what he's doing in games, go perform better, and be the person you're capable of being because he is athletically gifted. But he's not playing to any level of where you actually want to put him out on field. But yeah, you can look. I think we've written about 3-4 pieces at this point on the youth movement in Clemson.
It's all we have is youth movement.
It's what we got to hang on, boys. And Brock Lynn's part of that because he's a redshirt freshman.
What did you think, Zach? You also wrote about the underclassmen. You got to break down some of the performances with PFF grades and whatnot. What gives you some inkling of hope?
Yeah, I mean, I think the young linebackers, Justin Cryer graded out pretty well again, and he's been one of your higher graded players throughout the season on defense.
He got watching him play a ton.
Yeah, because got 33 snaps. He shows high effort.
You follow him and he gets to the ball.
Yeah,
he's always around the football. So you can just watch him before the play, and there's a pretty good chance he's going to be in the right spot and take you to where the ball's going.
Blake Nicholson also graded out over 60 on PFF with 36 snaps, 6 total tackles. Thought, that's a duo that you can build around for the future, which is, what FSU's staff thought about that group. But, I think it took a couple games to kind of figure that out. And then, yeah, I mean, I was just super encouraged by the tight end group for sure. Those are two guys that you need to get on the field as much as possible moving forward. I think, obviously, with the caveat that I don't know if Amari Williams is going to help you a ton, like Chris said, in the blocking game, but he's definitely a passing weapon for you, like a guy that you need running routes for you consistently because he's explosive and moves well for his size. And I was encouraged by that touchdown catch. His first ever catch results in a touchdown, just like Landon Thomas a week ago. Youth movement. I thought, I mean, Hakeem's technically a younger player. I thought he played a pretty good game aside from the fumble.
I thought it was the best game of his season so far.
Yeah.
One of the sneaky developments is like that Brock Glenn was quick getting him the ball, and there's some chemistry between those two that might be budding a little bit. Like
they roomed together the first year of college, so they're close. But Hakeem got the second most snaps at receiver behind Malik Benson at 47. I think he would have graded out better if he didn't have the fumble, which was luckily recovered by Amari Williams. But yeah, I thought Hakeem had a great performance, forced a few missed tackles, which is something that FSU's receivers need to do a better job at when they get the ball. And I don't, I'm not going to take too much away from some of the younger running backs that got snaps like Cam Davis, Sam Singleton, and Mekhi Danzy, just because Mekhi, they didn't run the ball with him, but with Cam, the yards before contact stat just speaks volumes with him. I mean, the one 10-yard run they had on the evening was Cam just moving his feet and not being able to get tackled, essentially, after getting hit at the line of scrimmage.
He carried a very large human with him on that play.
Yeah.
The 8 kid for Clemson up front is a fridge on legs.
Yes. So it was surprising that they were able to get that done. But, I think that speaks to his physicality at such a young age. And, hopefully this O-line can open some things up for that group because they have some young running backs that are talented.
All right. Anything else from the game before we go to some big picture mid-year check-in type of stuff?
I think we're done with the game.
Okay. So I want to go ahead and we kind of dipped our toe into this exercise a week or two ago, but let's spend the next 15, 20 minutes, rest of the episode, really leaning into it here. We're going to make you guys what do we want to say here? I don't want to say king for the day. The Duke of Doak. How about that? Chris, you were the Duke of Doak. That was a good one. I'm happy with myself for that.
You definitely wrote that down beforehand.
No, I didn't, but I did think about it before and then forgot about it. And now I remembered. Lost and found again. Chris, let's go ahead. We'll start off with you. I'm going to give you, and someone asked me this question, asked me anything we did on the board the other day. You're going to have 3 things you can do right away if you are basically given the crown to help. Mike Norvell comes to you and says, Chris, we need to get back to where we were before. I trust your expertise in all things football, especially FSU football. Help me out, buddy. What do I need to do? And you get to wave your magic wand as the Duke of Doak and say, we do these 3 things. And preface it to, as you think about it, we're not going to fire anyone because that's not going to help us report news. I don't like calling for people's jobs. Now, if you want to hire someone and move someone to a different role, you feel free to do that. But I'm going to where fans are, why is he not firing everyone? Don't feel like you have to fire anyone, Chris.
I mean, one for me is complete change in recruiting philosophy and approach. You've got to flip that script. You've got to change it. You had great success with what you did. You exploited a market deficiency. Now it's time to go recruit like other schools who are high-level schools recruit. And that means building relationships, owning your backyard, being better in the state of Florida, working harder than anybody else at it, getting people on campus, learning how to close the deal more effectively and being good at that. And however you got to go about doing that, whether it's the on-field coaches or the support personnel or the philosophy or the NIL or whatever, and it's probably all of those things, you got to get there. That's a necessity. It irritates me that FSU is 1-5 losing commitments and not pivoting at all with how their approach to recruiting has been so far. Everything has been very status quo. Secondly, as to not belabor that first point.
Well, hang on real quick. Let's touch on it. Zach shook his head adamantly. So Zach, you let's say you're the assistant here. You guys are gonna have to kind of agree. You're helping Chris out. You agree
Yeah.
with that?
I didn't know what the exercise was going to be, but I knew we wanted to talk about changes for the program, and I wrote that I think talent acquisition has to be the number one priority through the high school ranks, the number one priority of the program moving forward. Hire staffers with that mindset and hold them accountable to doing that at the highest level. I don't think FSU is going to consistently compete with top spenders in the NIL space, but I think it can win a few battles in that realm of spending, but be highly competitive in that tier right below the top spenders in this space, and that's kind of where they need to live. And you can still get some really talented players that maybe aren't going for millions of dollars or whatever, right? Yeah, I definitely agree with Chris on that point. I mean, they need to see a full philosophical change of how they build their roster, and that comes from Mike Norvell himself.
All right. So number one, let's combine the two into something amongst the lines of, because we wanted to stress prep recruiting, correct? For both of you guys, what you're kind of saying there is,
Yeah, I also think you need to stress getting players that fit specifically to a role. Quit trying to turn guards into tackles. God knows I love to turn corners into safeties and guards or tackles into guards. But there's a reason for that. Go find actual tackles, stuff like that. Like the whole trying to be, I don't want to say smartest guy in the room, but the whole idea of like we can coach around that. Get away from that. Jimmy and Joe's. Get the best.
there was some
At premium necessary positions, get the best.
there was some hubris, I think, in hindsight this offseason of you can coach anything because of the success that you've had in navigating and maximizing your roster the last few years. I do think that was a widespread fatal flaw for this year's program, and that was program wide, that you thought you can coach your way out of anything, and that's not proven to be the case. All right, so that's number one. We will say for Chris's list is prep recruiting, commitment, and philosophy overhaul. Number two, Christopher.
Offensive line. You got to fix it. It's a non-starter for your offense. I don't know if that's a change of who coaches it. I don't know if that's a change in philosophy, which I definitely think it is with regards to the way you build your personnel and put it together. But that group is an abomination. It's god-awful. They're terrible. They are literally why you are DOA as an offensive team 5 out of 6 weeks, really all 6 weeks this year. Cal just decided not to score against FSU. Yeah, you can't be that. We've seen a lot of shitty offensive lines at Florida State in recent years. This one takes a kick. They're god awful.
No, it's not worse than the 2018 one.
No, but it should be much better.
Okay.
Like that one sucked because it wasn't any good. This one stinks. And there's 2 guys on it who we know are capable football players who have done a good job at FSU, and they've regressed horrendously this year.
That's frustrating. Like it's funny after like some of Mike's tells, like when he starts getting upset about something, you can tell physically, like he'll start moving a little, hitting the table a little bit more, and talking about the snapping like was frustrating to him. And I don't think he has an answer for that. Like for Maurice Smith, it was like
Snaps,
one of the
holds, missed blocks, 5 guys that can't work together. Every part of that,
like this, all of it, and some of it's like physical, like you just whatever. There's things that you can and can't control. The snapping is like a bare, like essential minimum to that position, and so it's frustrating. You have a 6-year center who has 3 bad snaps in the game. I had a bad one against SMU. Hasn't had a whole lot of bad snaps in his career, certainly recently, to all of a sudden for that to become a thing that's now emerged that you have to deal with. And then the worst case scenario, guys, is like you don't have an adequate snapper behind him.
That's the more damning thing.
I think that is the more damning of like the big picture of what you've kind of thought every year you could snap your finger and just get a transfer center. And it's a joke, like Atkins has joked about, like we've been trying to replace Mo for years and he hasn't let us, which is cool. But you don't have a fortified, like we think Andre Otto maybe is your center of the future, but snapping isn't as important to everyone, I guess, as it is to us, or just they haven't been able to find it. In all seriousness, it's puzzling. Chris, for this exercise, when I was asked about it on the board yesterday, one of my answers was take $5 million of NIL and get that enhanced, go to a booster, reallocate it in your athletic department somehow. find a way to fortify $1 million for a starting offensive lineman all across the board. Boom, boom, boom. Figure it out. Go across the country. And so that was my answer. So we're kind of thinking similarly there. Zach, would you care to weigh in, or will you give us a check mark to make that number 2?
Yeah, I wrote that the focus needs to be building the trenches via the high school ranks. And to do that, they need to get away from the, oh, well, let's take a few guys, then just go in the portal and take the rest. Take a bunch of capable bodies, especially at the tackle position, because they've proven that they cannot find capable tackles in the portal.
No one can. A few people can. You did have a chance with
Carter
Carter Smith.
That was something they definitely believed they could do. So that's why I'm responding to it that way.
And they got a real good one in quotations in the portal and Jeremiah Byers, and we all know the returns on that is extremely mixed to mediocre to bad.
Yeah, I mean, he can't pass protect. So like, I just think the focus on this when it comes to high school recruiting needs to be on the trenches, and it needs to be on taking capable bodies, especially at the tackle position, to hopefully hit on a few of them. And I think when you take more bodies, like obviously you're giving yourself a higher chance to hit. And I think that's something that, they've taken a number of high school offensive linemen during Norvell's tenure here. I think it's like 15 or 16, but a lot of them come in, like Chris said, with guard bodies that you're trying to maybe move them to tackle, but it hasn't worked.
And tackle development in general, like even in the NFL, is a numbers game, to Zach's point.
Yeah. I mean, you're playing Darius Washington, who is an inherited player, and then Jeremiah Byers, who was a portal guy. Like those are the tackles. So I just, they haven't been able to find a replacement for out of the high school ranks in what, 5 years now. So
and I think the one blue chip tackle that you've taken to build on is Lucas Simmons, who
essentially lost his entire freshman year and is definitely a little bit behind the 8 ball as a second-year guy.
He's like lost a lot of weight, like physically and that happens during the season for some guys. But yeah, it's
Lucas does not look like somebody that you're ready to shove into prime time. People were mentioning it during the game, especially when they slid Darius inside of, why haven't we seen Lucas Simmons? Lucas Simmons isn't a guy that in practice, and I know practice isn't the end all be all. Jesus, if this year has taught us anything, but
you lied to us.
He is not ready to play. Like it's not a knock on Lucas. He just simply isn't there.
So again, to Zach's point, is that was you rolled the dice with one offensive tackle body that and it takes some time, but you're paying him pretty handsomely to develop, right? You're paying for that right to develop, and that is part of the strategies. Like if you're going to get multiple tackle bodies each class, you're going to have to pay for that, and you're paying for the right to develop, not for the actual production on the field generally, unless you get a freaky plug and play tackle. So anyway, sorry, Zach, back to you. Like that is, we're just kind of explaining the strategy, and it is a commitment that you have to make to it, both financially and scholarship perspective and recruiting efforts.
I agree.
Okay. So you mentioned the entire trenches.
Yeah.
Defensive end, defensive tackle as well in the high school level. You would also, that would be, so how would you make that better?
Well, I mean, this is tough. Yeah, I mean, I would allocate more resources to trying to land a number of talented defensive linemen out of the high school ranks. I think that's something that FSU's been willing to do, but I don't know if they've been put in a position by this coaching staff to go ahead and close on guys. I think an issue for them is they often think they're in a better spot for players than they actually are. And that causes them to maybe lose out on some players that they probably, should have taken a tier below the guys that they maybe have false hope on. And I just think, like the offensive line, you need to take bodies. Like last cycle, after a 13-win season, you signed three-star defensive linemen and one blue chip guy in Amari Williams, who's a tight end now. Like that's your D-line haul after an ACC championship season and an undefeated regular season year. Like,
and a 10-win season before that too, like where they weren't able to get Keldrick Falk, who went to Auburn.
And you just had you had 2 first-round draft picks at the end. In that
Jared versus they showed up at Doak. Was the rookie of the month for the NFL in the first month of the season. Crowd went really wild. It was cool to see, but like it has to help you more than it's helped you.
Yeah. So you need to be able to recruit that position better, obviously, and that's going to force them to be less reliant every year on just having to hit on 3 or 4 guys in the portal. I mean, that's essentially what happened this offseason, right? You lose all those talented players off of last year's line, and you're forced to go in the portal and take, 3 DNs or whatever. And, I think Marvin Jones and Sione Lolohea are playing decently for you so far. But yeah, I mean, one guy you took, Tamiwa Durojaye, like you probably paid him a good amount of money and he's not even playing for you, even though that is viewed as more of a long-term.
Yeah, to be fair.
Georgia's obviously a gold standard program, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. But like a few years ago, they ended up shorthanded essentially on their defensive line. So they have over-recruited their defensive line consistently in recent years. They're one of those schools that like you'll be writing a recruiting article and be like, oh, they already have 4 or 5 high school defensive linemen. So this kid probably won't go. Well, they're still recruiting him like they want him, like he's the first one of the next the 6. It's what they do. It's just sort of a throw numbers at the problem, get as many big bodies as you can, because big bodies are always the tougher ones to project, especially evolving big bodies. And you just do that. And FSU's kind of played on a very tight number regiment and had to lean on the portal, and obviously nailed it in the portal a couple times with guys like Jermaine and Jared. But you can only get away with that so long before it will bite you in the backside.
And that was like, to be fair, when people are critical of how this roster's been built, like that 2023 roster to that strategy, and Georgia lives that life. Like not only are they recruiting players in the trenches at a really high rate and just a high volume, they play them too. They have a deep rotation. And Mike Norvell talked about this last season, was like, we look at teams that win national championships, the amount of reps that their defensive line plays is really spread out. And like FSU went out and like with Derek Ray leading the charge, like they said, we're going to make a full investment in trench fortification on the defensive line, with Jared Verse being retained, with Fabian Lovett being retained, but then also adding in like Daryl Jackson ends up not even playing, but you went ahead and you got him, and you got Braden Fisk, and you got Gilbert Edmond. And so not all of these work, but like you threw numbers at it to where you had one of the deepest defensive lines, especially defensive tackle rotations, Malcolm Ray, Dennis Briggs in the country, and that helps you out at the end of the season. So like that plan was masterfully like executed. They tried to do the same thing this year, and you haven't gotten the player, the production from like your defensive ends. You thought you were going to be really deep at defensive end with your top 3. That hasn't been the case. But that's going full circle here. Like that's the risk you run when you rely heavily on the transfer portal. You don't have a whole lot of like homegrown developed options behind.
And when you miss on them, you ain't got
you got nothing
saving you.
Because you need 100% hit rate at that point for them to be good, and that's just not what's happening. So second point, we took what Chris said, tweaked it a little bit. So trench fortification starting in high school ranks. Like we will say that has to be an emphasis, both from the coaching staff you assemble, to the amount of money that you're throwing in there, to just the philosophy going into the first point. But like, okay, so this is still talent acquisition and fixing really important positions on the roster. Okay, number 3, Chris.
46%. Can you name what that number represents?
I know Chris likes the official. They're not getting a 46% of their official visits. Is that blue chip ratio on the roster?
No, it's third down defense this year. That's the percentage FSU's allowing conversions.
Oh, I wrote about that this morning.
You got to fix it. Like it's good defenses, bad defenses in the 5 years now. Third down has been a bugaboo. You got to fix it. Whether it's philosophy, what you're throwing out on the field, the aggressiveness that you play with, which is never near enough in my opinion, but I know I'm probably over aggressive. It's got to be better. It's a painful situation. Defenses have to get off the field. And if you're not generating takeaways, which FSU has not been very good at this season, You got to get off the field on third down, and they've been dreadful at it. And it's a consistent issue with defensive philosophy.
FSU is currently. Oh, wait, that's offense where they're 128th in third down conversion.
Yeah, offensively, FSU's converting at 29% to give you a comparison.
Yeah, it's even worse somehow. FSU's 118th nationally in defense, but like the third down and long defense is particularly perplexing because that should be like basically if you get someone in 3rd and 7, you should get them off the field a quarter or 3/4 of the time, right? Like you should almost always get them off the field. FSU is more like at a 2/3 of the time. And that's a big difference and that adds up. Like we saw that before half this past week against Clemson. No issue with Mike Norvell taking the time out there. He wants to try to steal a possession. That's how he coaches. We've seen the man coach for 5 years now. Like we know that's what he's trying to do. That's his philosophy. He's sticking to it. Fine with that. If you're trying to upset Clemson, you need to score points before halftime. Like that's kind of the rules of engagement at that point. But playing off coverage, and Clemson beat you twice with the same pattern against, I think, the same defense on third down. You end up scoring 3 points there before the half. Like those things add up throughout the course of a game. So third down defense, how do you fix it? Are you talking about, so you would basically say, Chris, we need to overhaul our system and be more aggressive on third downs. Like it's not good enough.
Whether it's personnel and packages or it's just simply the way you go about doing it. Like they get them into winnable third down situations for the defense and they don't win them enough. Opponents have run 50 more plays than FSU this year. Usually play count is not that big of a deal, but here's the thing. FSU opponents have a hell of a lot more explosive plays than FSU has. And the fact that they've also run 50 more plays is extremely concerning. That's why you are 1-5 in part. It's why scoreboard wise you can't keep up.
Zach, does this fit into anything that you had?
No.
Yes, I went a different direction than Zach. That makes for good radio.
I think mine's more fun.
All right, well, what do you have then? So what would be? So we got a semblance of two things that you found important. Do you have, what's the smirk for? Okay, go ahead. Let's go ahead and rip off the Band-Aid. What do you got?
Mike Norvell should give up his offense.
I was going to write that down as a buy or Sonone of whether we think that he should.
Do you think he would?
No.
I'm just asking, matter of fact.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't.
I agree with you.
And when you get to this part of the proceedings, like you hired a play caller, and if you start taking that away from them, like that's your. When does that ever go well long term? It's like when you start going to marriage counseling and you're not going there because it was productive. You're going there because you're fighting all the time. Like it's already kind of, not to get morbid on people, but.
Damn.
So Zach, you want him to be more CEO, less hands-on?
I do, and I think they should hire Brendan Marion. Bring the go-go to Tallahassee.
Dude,
the swell continues.
There are ties between Mike Norvell and Brendan Marion.
Deep ties.
Yeah, so let me pull this up. So Brendan Marion. First off, as I'm pulling this up, Zach, explain the go-go offense.
Well, first of all, let's explain who Brendan Marion is. He's at UNLV right now, and he created the go-go offense, and it's been really successful for them during his time there. He's a younger coach,
37 years old.
Yeah, but has had stops at several spots. Brendan, where is he? Intercepted.
You want me to take over? Did I throw that to you and you weren't super prepared? That's on me. He's actually had pretty well traveled. He was Texas's passing game coordinator and wide receiver coach in 2022, so familiarity with recruiting at a big level. Was at Pittsburgh in 2021. I think he was Jordan Addison's coach then, and I think that's a big reason why he ascended. Hawaii. He was OC at William & Mary, at Howard. So he's pretty well traveled. He's from Virginia area initially. So we want to talk about, actually played a little bit in the NFL, but we want to talk about his background and the ties to Mike Norvell. He was a player at the University of Tulsa when he was playing there in 2007. Mike Norvell was the GA at Tulsa in
2007
and 2008, and Brendan Marion was also there in 2008. And he was a receiver. Was Mike Norvell a receivers coach? He was. So Just saying, there might be a tie there. Also, Mike Norvell was at Arizona State in 2012 to 2015 as both the OC and associate head coach. Brennan Marion was at Arizona State as a quality control coach in 2015, Mike Norvell's last year there. So if Mike Norvell were to give up his offense, were to say, you know what, I need to focus on other things, I think it would make sense for him to entrust it to someone who he's worked with before and has a level of trust with. And I don't think you can go internal at this point, unfortunately, because of how bad the offense has been, frankly. Like, you just can't justify an internal promotion. I know Alex Atkins is the offensive coordinator in name right now. He does a lot to design the offense, but play calling is typically Mike's on game days. So I'm with you, Zach. I think an infusion, a change, someone who can recruit, someone who would bring players, both in the transfer portal and high school ranks, who would be interested. You'd have a young coach. It makes sense to me.
Do you like third down conversions?
It depends. Are we a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator?
Offensive coordinator. Brendan Marion at UNLV last season, his offense finished 6th in the nation in third down conversions at 49.3%, Chris.
I love me some stats.
They have a very fun offense to where they do this really cool formation where the quarterback has 2 running backs lined up on the same side as him. And it's not quite pistol. It's not quite like there's not a split back. They're lined up next to each other. And so it's this triple option type of offense, but it allows for all sorts of fun type of trickery, and no one else in the country runs anything like it. And it's been effective for 2 seasons now with them. So, and I think like Brennan Marion, I don't know if his next stop is as a head coach. The next stop for him as the offensive coordinator at UNLV would probably be at a Power 4 program to implement that offense there.
Yeah, and what better program to revive than the worst offense in the country?
Only one way to go.
Better.
Mm-hmm.
A former OC of Mike's is also out there and available. It's Kevin Johns.
They worked together at Memphis.
Yeah. 19. And then Johns was at Duke last year. When the Duke coaching change with Elko going to A&M happened, he was not retained by Manny at Duke. I think he's at OU, I believe. I think he's an analyst at OU right now. But yeah, just another name.
Yeah, I think that would be more of like a fortifying, like off-field type of deal. Like, I don't know if you're bringing him in to run your offense, because I don't think he did at Memphis. Pull him up, Zach. He kind of looks like your dad.
I just did. My dad's not that bald.
He looks like Jeff. All right, Chris, what do you think of that? You didn't.
I just don't think he would give up play calling duties.
Okay, so that'd be a move.
I mean, we're doing some things that we're suggesting some things that are probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. The one thing that I was going to suggest that I didn't hear either of you guys bring up is, like, I think.
Well, you only gave me 3.
I'm trying to keep it. Somebody, we want like an hour-long podcast.
I'd be like Jericho with the list. Trey will get that reference.
Yeah, if we did everything he wanted to do, this would be like a Civil War like length documentary, like a Ken Burns type of deal. I think that FSU would be well served to, when you talk about like an investment, and I don't think it's as an expensive an investment as maybe some other places just relative to cost. I think you really have to fortify and expand your front office staff, and that's getting Derek Ray help with people with NFL backgrounds when it comes to negotiating contracts and salary management. I think having an even deeper supply of scouts out there, because you only have a couple, people who are scouting. You need to be scouting literally for the transfer portal, like people doing that daily, people whose like job is totally that, to go ahead and like every single level of football that you're scouring. And even just someone with like really having dedicated people who have intel and who are giving you information that is like legitimately substantive with where you're at for recruitment. So you can't be getting caught off guard and people whose like job is just to be moles, private investigators, whatever. But like, so seeing like an NFL NFLification to your front office staff to make it widespread, several $1 million of just really like bolstering 5, 6, whatever, maybe even up to a dozen different people to go ahead and help your recruiting efforts and talent acquisition.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the biggest point there is really getting someone to help with NIL negotiations and the salary cap. Those are two huge things that I think Florida State needs to improve on when it comes to the talent acquisition process and roster building. And I think hiring people that are professionals in those fields with experience in those fields would be worthwhile. And I think that's where this sport is going to trend. With,
I was going to say, spin that forward. House settlement is going to basically bring that as a true necessity.
Yeah.
Anyways, whenever it is ultimately,
so they should have it already in place and have it functioning before it's a necessity. Yeah, I agree. That's a good one, Brendan.
So we were able to agree with our 2 out of our top 3 collectively, and then after that, it's just going to be a free for all to start the grab bag of fixing. Said it a lot last episode, guys. They got issues, so it makes sense that there's some variation there for what we think the issues are. Let's see. Okay, I got a quick buy or Sonone for you guys, and we'll get out of here. Ready?
Brought to you by the Turner Group.
The Turner Group, buy or Sonone. This isn't going to actually be a real buy or Sonone, though. Would you rather spend $5 million on coaching pool fortification or $5 million bump in NIL budget? It can only be one or the other.
Chris, go for it.
I will buy on the $5 million for NIL. Player acquisition is the most important thing. I like $5 million for both. Can we have $10 million total? I mean,
I'll call AD Alfred and see if we can just go ahead and just rummage up $10 million. Yeah, okay.
The Duke of Doak gets what he wants.
This is going to be an expensive venture fixing what's happened, but you got to throw more money into it because $10 million this year is a hell of a lot better than losing $20 million every year moving forward of football programs.
So to explain my buying of the $5 million for NIL over coaching is ultimately there are decisions that are made in constructing the roster currently that are financially based decisions. We can afford this for that, basically, type things. With $5 million, I think it's more we're going to go get this. And I think that's something that would benefit them.
That would put you at least this past year about probably top 3 or so in terms of operating budget.
Yeah, probably Ohio State, Miami, Ole Miss, you.
You can't say that Miami's paying for one of the biggest rosters in college football.
It's not true.
They're well invested. It's Jesus Christ. It's not a shot at them. Like, good for them. They're getting returns on it. Ohio State
had some really good officiating
Miami,
on their favor too. 2 weeks in a row.
I'm not touching that with an 87-foot pole.
What about an 88-foot pole?
Maybe.
Zach, buyer Sonone, $5 million to coaching staff fortification or NIL fortification?
You asked me this earlier, but I'm going to change my answer.
I asked you this. Wait, I asked you this earlier publicly or privately?
NIL.
I haven't gone over this yet, have we?
Yeah, you already asked this question.
We talked about this before we started a little bit,
but not in the episode.
No, but it was back when you weren't recording.
Okay,
and you actually
weren't. That's what I was getting at. Nothing that we say
before the red light came on.
Okay.
I think you really repeated yourself there.
I think Zach got confused and thought we were recording already.
We started talking about Miami, and Brendan just lost himself.
I didn't lose myself. Zach's the one who screwed this up.
All right, go ahead, Zach.
Targeting. No, I think I'll go with the $5 million NIL. $5 million. That's a ton of money. And you can go and get yourself probably the best quarterback in college football, or one of them in the portal or the high school ranks.
Well, you already have Brock Glenn, the best quarterback in college football.
True. Or you could go and spend it on a number of other positions that need help on this roster. So, I think we've talked at length about how we think there should be changes made to this staff after this season, but they're given one of the top operating budgets in the country. Like they're going to be able to outspend significantly for players, and I think that'd be the case with another $5 million in the NIL budget.
All right, I lied. I had one more buyer Sonone, sponsored by
The Turner Group.
Calling to get his money's worth. It's been a rough season. All right, buyer Sonone, FSU loses more than 23 players to the transfer portal this offseason. Now, for context, FSU's lost 22 players to the transfer portal in each of the last 2 off seasons.
I will. Oh.
This is a hard buy for me. Like this is spinning, boys.
I had a conversation yesterday, and I mentioned the idea of attrition and the concerns of attrition of both guys you want to push out because they don't bring value to your roster, but also the concerns of, well, you stunk, these guys are going somewhere else, or I'm going to go and try to get more money. I'm going to UCF it, not to bring up your alma mater. Sorry.
Too soon.
And I was sort of pushed back on that. They don't think that's going to be as much of an issue as I currently think it's going to be an issue.
Have you ever heard that before?
I'm going to buy. I'm buying it. There, I just talked myself into it. I'm buying. There you go.
Have you ever expressed an issue
Zach.
to the staff with recruiting before and then tell you that you're being silly and then it end up happening?
Never.
No.
Yeah, I'm buying that. I don't think there's going to be some mass exodus, but I do think that
What's a max exodus?
There's going to be players that leave this program, and I think the majority of that will be guys that that FSU is ready to move on from. But I'm sure there's going to be some that FSU is going to have to battle to keep, and they're probably going to lose a few of those battles because of how the season unfolded.
So you said buy?
That's why you got to go youth movement, man. Get them some snaps.
They are. That is happening. Yeah. So you said buy. So yeah, I think we see a lot of turn and burn this offseason. And partially it's like people are like, oh, do you think like on the board yesterday, someone was asking, like, do you think, I forget who it was, like, do you think Josh Farmer, Daryl Jackson, Shane Brown come back? Like, if someone's going to have a chance to go pro, like, I think Josh Farmer's playing NFL caliber football right now. Like, he should and will go pro. And he's basically indicated to you with every, like, that's important to him. Like, Daryl Jackson will probably get drafted just based on size, but hasn't performed particularly well this year. It's not good. It's an inside joke. But, like, if he doesn't, like, basically for these guys who have underachieved to their own expectations and your expectations, like, is everyone involved going to want to go ahead and do it again? Like, if you're a player and you feel like the coaching staff didn't get the most out of you, are you going to want to go ahead and use your last year of college eligibility with that same coaching staff? And vice versa. If you're a coaching staff, you thought, you had an NFL dude and a player who didn't perform like it, are you going to want to roll the dice again with that? So those are elements, and not just like young players leaving or guys who are on the bottom of the roster who aren't contributing leaving. Like, that's another element of like potential transfers, is those fringe guys who might be like undrafted free agents that want to try to bolster their stock, or are they going to try to do that at Florida State? So that's buy for me. Like, I think it's going to be, if it were like under 20, I'd be very surprised at this point. And that means I think also a lot of transfers you're going to probably end up bringing in too. Like, buyers to know more than 25 transfers.
Also known that I think it'll be right around 20.
Okay.
Also known 25 is a lot. But also that depends.
Are they going to have scholarship? Are they going to have scholarship limits this year?
Well, it'll probably be up to 100, I guess, with like mixed with the walk-ons. But
you're not the
biggest
with high school recruits.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's the biggest thing. It's like, how much are they going to fill up in the high school ranks? That's going to
impact. How many commits do they have right now? 11.
11.
I think it's 11.
And they're going to lose a few more, I would assume.
If they don't, that'd be pretty great, and we need to give them a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm serious. I
I agree. I just don't see how they're going to take that many more high school players. I don't know where those additions are going to come from at this point. I'm sure they will, But
on that subject, this being the bye week, they will get out on the road to recruit later in the week, going to some games. For example, TJ Griffin, who got offered this weekend, defensive lineman. Odell's supposed to be at his game on Friday. So this will be one of those weeks that's a little bit of a tell of both the efforts to retain guys and the efforts to potentially identify or pursue new targets, or targets that they believe are still attainable between now and December, 4th?
yeah, quickly, they hosted 2 OVs over the weekend. Mario Nash and Daniel Pierre-Louis, both offensive linemen. Mario Nash is committed to Mississippi State. He's a 4-star interior guy out of Mississippi. He told Clay Fink afterwards that his pecking order right now is Mississippi State, then Florida State, then Ole Miss, a little bit down the way. So yeah, Florida State's battling there, but seems like Mississippi State's in a spot to hold on, at least for now. And then Daniel Pierre-Louis is a, guy that's kind of emerging on the scene late. FSU was early relative to other schools because they offered him during the summer, but hosted him for an OV surrounding the Clemson game. Florida's now in the mix. NC State's another school involved, but FSU is a program that's been involved longer than those two. And, they sit in a good spot, but he's going to take visits to NC State and Florida coming up. So we'll see how that recruitment unfolds.
Okay. Got anything else? Feel good? No. Answer's no to both. All right. That means we're at a good stopping point. All right. For Chris Nee, Zach Blostein, I'm Brendan Sinone. This has been On the Bench. We'll talk to you guys later this week.